2 seconds. Yeah. All right. We are live. What's up, everybody? You are watching Just For My People, an interview series hosted by me. My name is Chris Carr. Yeah. Nice to see you again. And today we have an amazing, wonderful, special guest. Introduce yourself, my friend.
Hi, I'm Cotenord from Chicago.
All right. And so glad to have you on. For folks that have been following and for the folks that don't know, I've been interviewing various artists as to how they run their businesses and how being an entrepreneur kind of shapes their mindset and how we're adapting to like this pandemic and the shutter inside. And I've noticed a huge overlap between what my friends who make music are having to do and what my friends who work in adult entertainment are having to do. And so, Evie, could you give us a brief background of who you are and what you do?
I am a full-service sex worker, and I work in Chicago, and I'm currently shut down because you can't do full-service sex work without contact because it's really important to the full-service part. So it's really hard to do from 6 feet away is like have sex with somebody. So I've moved everything online, and I'm making it up as I go along right now.
So prior to this time period, were you already utilizing like OnlyFans or online services, or is this something totally new for you?
I was not. I was completely in person. I wasn't doing any online content. I didn't want to do online content. I had no interest in it. I was afraid of it. I didn't have the equipment or anything. But now I'm like, I have a porn studio in my house. So.
Okay. And so how has that adjustment been for you? Like, are there benefits or pros to doing online work? And what are some of the drawbacks or cons?
I mean, the benefit is that I still have an income. I can still work. I can still stay in contact with my clients. You know, I mean, and I'm so unbelievably grateful to have that as a resource for like income and, you know, just feeling like I have something to do during, you know, this crisis. Because, you know, like you talked about with, you know, other sex workers is that, you know, we don't get unemployment, and, you know, other entertainers and artists, you know, we don't get unemployment. I didn't qualify for unemployment in the state of Illinois, and I didn't qualify for like the $600 a week that the federal government is offering. So, you know, having an income is a big deal. So that is a huge bonus. The negative is that it's really, I really miss my work, and it really drives home how much I really care about what I do. I miss seeing my clients in person. I miss being able to offer like physical affection and physical touch. I am making way less money for working far more hours. I work about 10 hours a day now, and I make half of what I make in an hour in my normal work. So that is...
Whoa. I mean, so without going like too specific, if you don't want to, but what are normal rates like? Like if we weren't in a pandemic, how much can you generate in an hour normally?
I make $500 an hour, and but like I don't work, you know, 10-hour days. Normally, right. I work, you know, 4 or 5 hours a week is kind of my goal. You know, or at least like that's what I bill. You know, I still have my administrative stuff to do, but like I'm actually like doing client work 4 to 5 hours a week. Sometimes more, sometimes less, but like that's kind of my comfort spot. So, yeah, it's $500 an hour, and now I make like less than $250 a day, and I work 10-hour days. And like having the clients in my home is also a little weird, like having the cam set up in my home. Like they're now in my bedroom, like looking at me in my home and my stuff, and it's a very weird boundary to have crossed, and
Right.
it feels very vulnerable.
I mean, and are you, I guess, adapting to the performative element? Like in person, clearly there's always a performative aspect to human interactions, but there's also kind of a natural ebb and flow of like when you're actually with a person. When you just have a camera in front of you or your computer, is that a different dynamic for you?
I still try to do mostly like calls and like private one-on-one cam shows and custom content, but it is really different, and it drives home like how lonely this business is. And it's a really isolating profession to begin with, because of the stigma and the fact that it's illegal. There's already this huge isolation, and now like we're isolated in isolation, and not having even like that contact with our clients is very it's a much harder thing. It's a different skill set completely. I feel like I'm adapting okay.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I've noticed that like for artists or musicians that first week when everything was shut down, everyone was trying to stream, and really quickly a lot of artists realized it wasn't great for their style of music. Like the sound quality wasn't good. You need the engagement of the energy from people in a crowd sometimes. And now they've just stopped doing it. Others have really adapted well to it. In terms of something you mentioned with the stigma or the interpersonal connectivity, a lot of people I talk to assume that no one actually wants to do sex work and that it's this horribly oppressive job. And as we're talking to people, you're hearing that, sure, it's like any job, there are parts you like or don't. But that you said there are some things you do appreciate about the interpersonal elements. Can you discuss that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, nobody wants to be middle management either. So, that's, nobody like grew up being like, oh, I can't wait to be like the assistant director of HR at KPMG when I grow up. Like, so, are there oppressive elements? Yeah. I mean, but it's also, I make $500 an hour and I'm able to work out of the house 5 hours a week and support my family as a single mother. I'm home almost full time with my kids. We have, we have an income, we have time. Like I am a hands-on single mom and making six figures, which is something that I cannot do in a 9-to-5. Right. I don't particularly like working 9-to-5 jobs, but I have a criminal record, and it's work that I can do. It's work that I'm good at, and so I mean, most people don't gravitate to this as like their first choice,
right?
Because it's because of the stigma, it is like it perpetuates itself. Is that like this ends up being a last resort for a lot of people because we framed it as a last resort. So yeah, I did end up here as kind of a last resort, but I stayed here not as a last resort because it was really a good fit for me, and I felt like I really think that like the political implications of doing that, like this is like my right to do with my body, and that kind of stuff, like that's important, and it's good work. I mean, my clients are not terrible people. Like a lot of them are very wonderful people that I really enjoy spending time with, and that's there's parts of the job that I genuinely like love to do. If you say like I like my work, and people are like, oh yeah, sure you do. Like no, but not like that. Like sure, I mean that's great. Like everybody likes orgasms, but like that's not like the bulk of like what I enjoy about my work. I like the people, and it's really interesting to get to see people in this really fascinating context where like they don't have anything to hide, and they don't have to also play by like the rules of like what is expected of them and like the outside of the room in society. And there's this vulnerability and openness and like really interesting aspect of people that you learn by being in the room with them.
Yeah, I mean, if you were to be able to name maybe two or three things that folks tend to stigmatize but are kind of dead wrong about, what would be your first two or three that come to mind?
About the work.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, there's this idea that it is, really brutal and dehumanizing. And I can say that the work, when it is violent, is very violent. And I have experienced a lot of violence. But overall, I would say that it's safer and more respectful than anything I experienced, like dating men in, the regular social world. They are more respectful. They're, and they seem to like appreciate me more. And maybe it's because I have a price tag. Maybe it's because like they're invested in the experience. I don't know. But there definitely is a difference in what you experience and how you're treated by men in the two worlds. There's also this idea that like we're all drug-addled, supporting habits. I'm actually 4 years sober.
Congratulations.
So, yeah, thank you. When I did start, I was using. And I got, I took time off, I got sober, and I got back in. And I really credit this work with being part of what's helped me to stay sober, which is something that most people like wouldn't like assume. But I have so much control over how I'm able to take care of myself because I have so much time. And I'm also able to control a lot of my environments. I'm able to control who I'm around. I get to choose my clients, which is another thing a lot of people don't think. Somebody contacts me, I screen them and I decide whether or not they're a safe person for me to see. Right. And so I can decide who is safe and who isn't safe. And I can, do my work that I need to do to take care of myself and my mental health and my family outside of work that I wouldn't have if I was working, 50 hours a week. It's really, for me, and it's not work that's for everybody, but for me, this is like a real gift that I've been given to be able to like live my life.
And in terms of being your own boss, how do you find that? And is there an element that you appreciate?
It's hard. I enjoy the freedom of being my own boss, but I'm not necessarily a business-minded person. I do have an assistant, and now that I'm locked at home, I have somebody who I actually have my partner lives with me, and they help me, with my content and everything. So I enjoy the freedom of being kind of creative and doing, my own branding and getting to put my own personality out there. Yeah. And, but also there's like this stress of like when shit goes down and like shit goes wrong, that's all on me. Like I don't have anyone.
Yeah, I mean that's one of the arenas where I first started noticing an overlap. I was booking shows with burlesque performers and MCs and folk artists, and I was like, damn, these burlesque performers have to make their own costumes, buy all their own shit, take cabs because of how they're dressed. They can't really take the train. they're doing their own booking, they're their own managers, their own agents, their own accountants, and I'm like, that's like an indie rapper with extra shit. And there was like an amount of respect and the rates. Because honestly, when I first started booking burlesque artists, and they're like, yo, it's gonna be $150 for a 2-3 minute set. So I'm like, $150 for 6 minutes? You're crazy. And then as we spoke, I was like, oh, you got to do this. Okay. And it opened up, and we started having more conversations as to how rappers could learn in a way from some of the burlesque performers, and how some of the burlesque performers could learn from the rappers who were doing their own tours or who were figuring out how to do kind of meet and greets and things of that nature. And for me, I'm more of an artist and a business person, but I've had to make a living off of my art for the past 10 or 12 years. And so that's also been a commonality I've seen. And in talking to people, some folks who are more creative oriented, some folks who are more business oriented, the people that have had to learn each side. And so I appreciate hearing your expression of that.
Yeah, it's yeah, I love, yeah. And I mean, you know, I'm, you know, but before this, you know, I was a writer. So, you know, I have that kind of like creative, and I went to college for music. So I am like kind of, you know, artistically sort of, that's my background. So it's fun to kind of, you know, use that in my work, but it's not always easy to manage a business with that.
Yeah.
Great.
I mean, all right. And so your Twitter handle though is, would you like to tell us what your Twitter handle is?
Oh, hold on, let me pull it. I don't remember what I change it sometimes because I'm like, it was the anal queen of Chicago, but and now I make porn. EB Cotenord, I make porn now. It's butt porn.
And it's and so how did you come up with this as your moniker?
Because I moved from being like the anal queen of Chicago. My mom, I know, like my mom wanted me to get a master's degree, but instead, like I became a queen. So I'm like a monarch here in Chicago. So I was the anal queen of Chicago, but like I had to like move to doing porn, and I'm like, you know, I'm in my 40s. I don't get to like be like, I'm 19 and I just became legal and come watch my cam, and like I don't have like
you're going in and out. You're going in and out. Can you repeat that last part?
Oh, I said like I'm not 19 and like I don't get to be like, oh, I'm just legal and I'm horny and like my tits are up to here and my abs are super hard. Like so I got to go with my brand, and that's anal. So I make butt porn now. Am I still here?
I mean, yeah, you're here. I think are you connected to the same Wi-Fi as your phone?
Yeah.
Can you disconnect your phone from your Wi-Fi? Oh, you just disappeared.
I disappeared?
All right, now you're back.
Okay.
Because yeah, when I saw your Twitter, I was kind of like, wait, is that just a post? And then I'm like, wait, no, this is like the whole name of the handle.
Yeah. Yeah, I want people to know that I make porn now. It's butt porn.
Oh my God, we're having technical issues. See, this is what always happens also with the computers. As soon as we get live, then the computer's acting up. All right, are we back? We here?
I think so. I'm trying to like I'm shutting things.
Okay. Yes, we are back.
Okay. All right. We're back? Yes, no.
Oh yeah. So for people tuning in, you are watching Just For My People. We have wonderful guest EB. All right, yeah. So go ahead. What were you saying?
Oh, so I don't know where I cut out. I was just saying that like, you know, I had to switch to porn, and I'm not like, you know, a 19-year-old hard body. And I am in my like full service life. I am the anal queen of Chicago is like part of my branding. So when I made porn, I had
wow.
To, like, people
this is making me wonder if some of the fake people can do it. talking and they're jamming the or like somehow we're getting throttled on purpose. Hold on, you just went in and out again. Wondering if somehow this is like observed or listened, and they're like, "Oh wait, y'all are talking about your shit right now. We gotta shut this. We can't let this fly."
Yeah.
Let me on mine or on there because we were just about to get into it. All right, you're back.
I'm back. Oh my gosh. So every time I talk about ANAL, it like throttles me.
Yeah, you know that I was wondering like if that's what's happening. And so all right, how can we have this conversation without getting throttled? How did you I don't know how you like get the crown of that. Like how do you become the queen?
I think it's part numbers, part reputation. Like I didn't even coronate myself. I actually have a friend. I mean, like, you know, it was something that like I wanted people. I actually one time had a conversation with a bunch of my colleagues, and I'm like, how do I like get the word out that like that's my that's my professional preference? And I was like, I don't think there's a way to like explicitly do it, but somehow I managed to, and then word got out, I guess, and you know, it's one of my talents. It's one of my talents. So I guess I'm good enough at it to be like the queen. There's like Queen Elizabeth, there's like Beyonce, and then there's like Edie. So queens.
And in terms of developing your branding or your marketing, how do you like as an entrepreneur, as like kind of the business aspect, how do you stand out in a world where so many people now are creating content and so many people are getting into adult entertainment or escorting?
Oh my God, it's hard, you know. I mean, because I did build this brand, and you know, I started in 2015, so it's, you know, I haven't been doing it long for someone my age, but you know, trying to figure out what people wanted and what I could be to those people was something that, you know, I really struggled with. And I'm not, you know, I'm not somebody who's like really good at being like really explicit and like putting it all out there. And there's a part of me that just like doesn't, I take it seriously, but like not so seriously. Like there's still like, you know, I think it's important work, and I think human touch is a vital human need. But also like I can't take it really seriously that like I literally eat assholes for a living. So, you know, there's so, you know, there's like I realize that like it's really about like being me and just kind of being thoughtful, but also a little, you know, but not being like overly whatever about like just being pretentious or
right.
You know, I can't be like that explicit girl that's like bimbo-y, like I love getting fucked. We all do, Natalia, we all do. But
well, no, I mean, I think that's been one of the elements in doing these interviews. It's been really insightful to see the people behind some of the brands, or like recognizing like with rappers, they were folks when I was growing up that were like conscious rappers, but when you met them, they were not quote unquote conscious. They were not like vegans. They weren't super nice to everyone, and they were gangster rappers that literally on camera or their persona was tough guy, but when you met them, they were the sweetest dudes ever. And so that's and part of this interview series is to kind of get past some of that persona, but to let people see like, yo, as people with jobs, this is what this is.
yeah, and I mean, for me, there's not much of a divide between the two, but for some people, there really is. Like, you know, their you know, work persona is nothing. Like, you know, and they've intentionally divorced the two, and you know, I completely respect that.
I mean, for your personality, are you totally transparent with everyone, or is this kind of like a secret thing people find out later, or how do you manage then the social dynamics of what your job is and what people think about all that?
I'm bad at secrets and hiding things. So, and I put my face out there. So, I'm out. Like people know that I do this. It was really funny. Like last night we had this like big, like whole family, like all my cousins and everything. We had this like Zoom Cinco de Mayo party. And one of my cousins was going around like, so, Frank, are you working from home? So, Rachel, you working from home? And I was just like, I turned to my partner, I'm like, watch, nobody's going to ask me if I'm working from home. And I just sort of like skipped over, like nobody wants to know what I'm doing during COVID, during this family party, but it was funny. And yeah, all my friends, everybody, my kids, everybody knows everybody.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's another element that I've run into is like the stigma that you have to live like a double life, or this idea of like if you have a family or partners, this is something you can't really do. Yet almost everyone I've interviewed either has a live-in partner, has children. It's definitely hasn't inhibited in their ability to connect with people.
I think there are people who do live a double life, and it's really hard. And I don't envy them. I mean, I admire them for the fact that they're able to like pull that off. I don't have the capacity to do that. But yeah, so like the only way that I could survive was to just be out like from the get-go. I'm not somebody that generally has, secrets or anything to hide. So but yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say that it doesn't affect my ability to connect with people, because there's definitely like a lot of judgment. Making friends, dating, really, really hard to do. But it can be done. I mean, it's not impossible. And I do have, a really supportive family. My kids are amazing and they're like young. They're 13 and 10. And they're supportive and they know what I do. My partner knows what I do. They edit my porn. So yeah.
Yeah, wow. And so you have recently started another element of your own business, which is doing a podcast. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, I had actually started working on it in December, and I had planned on launching it in January, and then I got put off. And so now, my partner and I've used COVID as like our excuse to like just get in and just like fucking do it. So yeah, I did just launch. I just launched my third episode of the podcast. It's called Laid Bare. And the most recent episode, actually, I do interview my son about like what he thinks of me as a mother. So that's and seeing like the reactions from people, like me talking to this like young teenage boy about my work is, because I'm talking to him like this is like our normal life, and it's not weird, but people are like, holy shit, that's amazing. That was like really incredible that we heard that. And I was like, oh, I thought it would be interesting, but I wasn't expecting that response.
Wow. I mean,
it's just like dropped. Like, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I don't have kids. My mom isn't even on Facebook. So I, with some of my work, I'm a nude performer at times. I participated in nude art shows or events where like, I'm out there, and I'm a pretty strong advocate for expression, if that's your thing, like to be able to express yourself. And I used to host kink parties and kind of play parties, but no one in my family's on the internet. Like no one, like my aunt one time called me and was like, have you seen your website? And I'm like, why, what's wrong? Is it down? She's like, have you seen it? Have you seen it? And I'm like, what's wrong? She's like, there's a woman's vagina on it. And I was like, yeah, I do nude photography. That's how I get work, is to show people what I do. Like, what are you tripping about? But that was like years ago. And since then, they kind of know what I do, but no one gets confronted with it. And so I'm always amazed, like, how people manage that. Like, I can't even fathom taking care of a goldfish, let alone like a child while like working and shit like that. So it's phenomenal to me that you have that amount of communication or openness.
Yeah, well, one of the things we talk about on the episode is that there was like one time that I caught him like watching free porn, and we had to have this whole conversation. I'm like, you can't, like, if you're gonna watch porn, like, you can't do it for like two reasons. Like, one, you're not paying for it, and this is somebody's living, and you can't, download free porn. And two, they said that you have to be 18 and you don't have consent. And then I was like, but also now, if you're going and you're looking at porn, like you're going to the free sites, you don't know that my porn has not been pirated and put it on there. So if you're downloading free porn, you could end up watching mine. So don't do it.
No.
And he's like, oh my God.
That's strong. No, go into that because you're the first person to mention this idea of by supporting free porn in a way you're supporting piracy or not respecting other performers or folks who should get paid. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Well, porn, sites like Pornhub have really like destroyed the porn industry. It's really hard to make money selling porn because, that's like, the old joke is that like no one pays for porn. It's the internet, it's free porn. But like we're not out there making it because like we have nothing better to do with our dignity. We are doing it to make money, and if you're downloading it for free, we're not getting paid. And I'm making it to pay my bills.
Yeah, and do you find there to be a difference in the sense of do you run stuff through your own site, or how do you get your material distributed?
So I have OnlyFans, and I run stuff through Night Furler, and then I do customs. So, there's not a lot of outlets for people to pirate it, and that doesn't mean that it won't be.
Right.
But that's real. So like for me, I'm like, by the time it would get pirated, and like I don't think that I'm special enough that there's going to be a lot of pirating. Now there is, because I've said that. But
I mean, also you are the queen, so
I am the queen. I am the anal queen. So, so my hack right now is to like, not to bring up Beyonce again, but like if I put Beyonce in the background of my porn, I just assume that like if it gets pirated, Beyonce will have it taken down right away because like she does not like. She's on top of that shit. So I'm just like, I'll just put Beyonce tracks in the background. And then if anybody pirates it, she's going to be like, you cannot have my music. You cannot even, and they'll like take it right down. So.
And what have been your experiences? Because I've talked to some folks who work with studios and that the performers don't get royalties from the films they make with most studios. They kind of get a flat for hire fee. And then whatever's done with the content later is what's done. And, tens of thousands of dollars can be made. They don't get it. With some of the sites like OnlyFans, I've had discussions about like the percentages or if people felt it was equitable. Kind of what's your take on how the money gets split in your business?
It is not, it's not fair. Like we are not respected as workers. I don't know what it's like to work with a studio. I do know that from people who are primarily important, like I've been doing this for weeks now, so I'm barely an expert, but people have said like they get paid a flat rate and they don't get royalties. And there was one performer that I saw that was like, go ahead, download the free shit. Like I'm not making more the more you buy, but
and you're in a different situation though, to where like you literally are getting paid via subscriptions or downloads, or
I'm paid for the content that I create because I create it myself and I distribute it. So it's not that I just get the paycheck up front. I mean, if I make custom content, like, I just made a few and sent them out, I get paid one time. And if that person wants to distribute it, they can. And I will not get paid more than once for that.
Okay.
But I mean, they don't have distribution rights like a studio would, but like my stuff goes on to, these, niche sites where it's just me. But like I pay 30% to Night Flirt. I pay 20% to OnlyFans. And when somebody buys or tips me.
Wow. That's wow.
Yeah.
I mean, to imagine how many different people are on these sites and they're getting like 1/5 or almost like 1/3 of the profit. That's insane.
Yeah. I mean, I have no problem paying them to host my content, but I'm also like, why am I paying you, 20, 30% of my tips?
Right.
Like,
right.
I'm fine with like you taking a cut of the sales, but if like I was working in a restaurant, I wouldn't be paying management my tips. I'd be paying them
right.
my sales.
So I mean, often when I've spoken with folks who have a leaning towards activism, one of the issues that comes up is kind of workers' rights and payment issues, where exotic dancers or strippers have to like often pay to go to work, and it's kind of like a ridiculous thing. Or there is this like tip out thing to where the dancers have to pool their tips to pay off the DJ, and the club doesn't pay the DJ. Do you see yourself in any way as being an activist or an advocate?
I do. I feel like I try to be pretty outspoken, and I am pretty passionate about like workers' rights, and not just in my field, but in general, being paid fair wages and having safe workplaces, and all those like the proletariat uprising and
Word.
things like that. But yeah, I mean, I don't like the way that the legal side of the industry is hugely exploited, and I actually find it more exploitative than the underground market of the industry. Because, I don't feel like, there is a difference between like legalization and decriminalization.
Right.
And the reality is that porn and stripping are legal, but they're still criminalized. You can still there's still things that are illegal, and you still have like all of these, barriers to entry that can get you busted. Like cops are constantly raiding strip clubs. You can still be arrested as a stripper. And the fact that it's legal but still criminalized means that there's, these exploitative practices of these strip clubs that are like, okay, well, you have to pay $100 to come in, and then you have to tip out this much, and then girls come home, and I say girls, but any gender can work in sex work. But you go home with like less than what you walked in with some days.
Right.
And that's true, and I know that's true in any business where you're working for yourself, but also in strip clubs and in studios, like there's no worker protections. There's no they're not employees. There's no so there's no like benefits. There's no overtime. Right. There's none of that, but they're still expected to show up at work, like, and it's really it's crushing how they are treated.
Yeah, I guess they're like independent contractors. I remember being in class. I was taking a industrial organization class, and we were talking about sexual harassment in the workplace. And I was like, well, how does that work for like a person who's in a strip club? And my professor kind of looked at me like, what do you mean? They're in a strip club. Like they don't really get to establish boundaries. And I'm like, wait, that's asinine. It's still work. And there should still be something that prevents your boss from encroaching on your personal space or saying crazy shit. And it was like, to them, they had just chalked it up like, well, no, once you're in that arena, you don't get protected. It's your own fault. And I was like, what? Like, you got a PhD and you're saying this.
Yeah. And I mean, that's, there's even, like feminist schools of thought that believe that. And, one thing that, I've experienced and I know that it's, true across the board in our industry. And it's not like, women who are victims of sexual violence are treated well by any stretch of the imagination in our country and in our culture. But when you are a sex worker, it is assumed that is part of your job. it's expected. It's like you're literally asking for it. And at one point, I experienced an instance of violence, and I said I didn't want to get a rape kit. I was taken to the hospital, and I was held as a suspect for prostitution as opposed to being a victim. I had an armed guard standing outside of my hospital bed at the emergency room waiting for my rape kit, which was actually evidence collection against me.
That's insane.
Yeah.
And are there organizations or groups that are working to change this type of structure?
There's sex worker organizations that are run by sex workers for sex workers, like, you know, for example, like SWAP is the big one, Sex Worker Outreach Project. But and there's a lot of organizations that are sympathetic, but we are a low priority demographic.
Wow.
People don't care about sex workers. They, you know, it's, and even people who, you know, are like, oh, well, I support your right to do what you want. Like, they don't want to look at us, and they don't want to look at our experiences, and they don't want to see us as people. And, you know, we're still the butt of the joke. And there's no one looking out for us. And, you know, politicians aren't going to be looking out for us. And to support us as a nonprofit isn't good for getting donations. Like, you're going to get donations from sex workers and not a lot of other people until, you know, we've gone out and really like changed the images of whores, which, you know, we've been working on since jobs began. So, you know, we're doing our best, but it's you know, I don't know that we're fighting a winning battle. It's worth fighting, but it might not be a winning battle.
Yeah, one of my friends works with the organization, I think called Red Canary Song, that's based in New York, and they've been going up to Albany and trying to work on some legislation. But they've had to overlap it with, because of her background, her family is, I believe, Chinese. And so they were working with folks that were in the massage parlors and with migrant workers. And so they had to kind of couch the migrant worker and the mistreatment of immigrants with the topic of sex work to then get it legitimized. Or like I had a friend down in Florida where they, again, were trying to approach like city council or like get local work done, but they had to overlap it with another kind of concept or another activist platform in order to get respected. And it's just alarming to me that like when there's so much discussion, or at least I'm hearing so much discussion around it, that the politicians are still so hands off.
Well, I mean, one of the problems with politicians is that like it's not actually in their best interest to have us as like, even if we're like, well, we vote, and I mean, like, losing the hooker vote is not a negative when you're running your campaign. Like, to be like, oh, hookers won't vote for me is going to get you more votes than it's going to lose.
Right.
You know, and then when you know, there's politicians that have said, like, you know, when you've talked about like this legislation, like, this is going to hurt sex workers. This is going to be dangerous. This is going to make it less safe for us. You know, politicians' responses a lot of times, like, we don't want to make it safer for you. We want it to stop. Right. And, you know, if the cost is us dying to stop prostitution from happening, they're willing to take that risk. But, you know, the reality of sex work is that when you look at the intersection of every single marginalization and every single oppression, like, that is where you find sex work. Like, everybody who ends up in a place where they can't support themselves or where they're, you know, pushed into the margins of society, they turn, you know, somebody is turning to black market work, because that's where you end up. And so, like, when you are, you know, that's, every single marginalization has representation in sex work. And so it is an immigrant issue. It is, you know, a disability issue. It is a racial issue. It is an economic issue. It's everything. It is everything. It's a queer issue. It's everything.
That's also been an element of these interviews that have, in a way, astounded me in the intersectionality and not the academic use of that word, but the actual reality of there seems to be a personal attachment with the people that I've interviewed to where they are concerned with and aware of trans rights issue via their work process. Or like I've had discussions with folks where they're like, oh, racism isn't an issue in porn. But then when I'm speaking to people who are in this field, they are, every time they mention the disparity between different groups and different marginalized voices. And so it's amazing, like the difference between what is put on the forefront or like what the media presents versus like now that I've been talking to people about it in more depth.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, am I still here?
Yeah, I got you.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it really, I mean, you know, queer people make up a huge proportion of the sex industry because, you know, these are people who have not had workplace protections, so they can be fired for, you know, being trans is something that people can legally fire you for or not hire you for in so many places. And even when it's not legal, like, let's be real, like, you know, somebody can just, you don't have to justify not hiring or firing somebody, or you can cover your ass. It's really easy to fire somebody for things that aren't legal to fire somebody for. And, you know, they lose their families, they lose their security, they lose their ability to, you know, connect with their communities and their churches. And, you know, they don't, you know, there's homeless shelters that won't take in trans people. So what do they do? You know, what do you do? And when you get there, it's, you know, the one thing that is true for trans people is that they're hugely fetishized, and there's a market for that, and they will be welcomed in, you know, this area. It's very dangerous. It's very, very dangerous to be an illegal worker. It's dangerous to be a trans person. It's dangerous to be an illegal worker. It is so dangerous to be an illegal trans, you know, a person who is trans and doing something that is illegal. And like, as you add things like immigrant, trans, sex worker, Black, trans, sex worker, like, you know, it compounds.
Yeah, I mean that to me has also been an interesting part of the worker safety conversation, and that when you deal with something like, there becomes this like false equivalent sometimes. Of like people say, well, it's just like if you sell drugs. You know, if you're selling drugs and you get robbed, you can't call the cops. And to me, I'm like, wait, how'd you just equate a person deciding to use their body for work to selling drugs? Like that's like a weird way to frame the conversation.
Yeah, I mean, the difference is that, I mean, you know, first of all, like, I have my own thoughts about like people who sell drugs, like, should, you know, they're doing, you know, they most of them have very few opportunities for economic mobility. You know, Black market workers are there for a reason, so I don't necessarily differentiate them, but I know they are inherently different things. You know, the difference with me asking for sexual violence and somebody else asking for sexual violence is the difference that I got paid. You know, if I go home with a guy and he beats the shit out of me and rapes me, like, does it make a difference whether he gave me $5 or not? And that's, you know, that's the point of contention, is that like, I can do any of these things as long as somebody does not give me money for it. And like, it's unacceptable as long as I don't money. And then as soon as somebody pays me, it's like, well.
Right. Wow. So I mean, you give us a lot to think about. I really appreciate you coming on the show and really being open and transparent and very informative. And like I told people when we first started, I feel like totally underdressed. Like I like slept in this sweatshirt and then like you got makeup on.
Yeah, because I gotta look like I gotta look like I'm the anal queen. Like I gotta look my part. Like I have to look royal. Great.
But I appreciate it and for doing the interview. If there's anything you'd like to leave folks with or something you'd like to say on our way out, now's the time.
Just pay for your porn, respect sex workers, download my podcast, and stay safe and be good to each other.
Yeah, if you want. Oh yeah, this is the time to plug. Like where do people download? How do they find you? What's the thing?
Currently, it's best found on Podbean. I'm trying to get it up everywhere, but it's a whole process. So if you go to laidbear.podbean.com, you can download it, and you can hear the Mother's Day episode where I talked to my son about being a good mom.
That's amazing. And if people would like to follow your Twitter, what is that again?
It's EB Cotenord, Cotenord.
Awesome.
And also, that's my OnlyFans. And so if you like butt porn.
Now, and this is not, it's all right. This is a whole nother conversation, but this is also you also eating ass or just your ass getting played with?
Well, it's all like social distance porn right now because I am locked up in COVID. So It's really just like me playing with my own butt, but like, use your imagination. Like you could be the person in my butt.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much. And I wish you the best. I hope you have a wonderful day.
Thank you so much for having me. You too.
All right. This has been Just For My People with EB Cotenord. Is that how I say your last name? Cotenord. EB Cotenord. I'm your host, Chris Carr, known as Parn Hash. You see the name right there? Yeah, there it goes. And this is Just For My People, presented by Brooklyn Wildlife. Peace.
Thank you.
Thank you.